and we're now live. All right, so land use regulations and environmental issues. What we're going to learn today is how we have restrictions placed by private parties, restrictions placed by the government, and then Environmental Protection Agency also oversees part of what we do, what we can and cannot do with our property. All right? So as far as land use controls, we're going to start with private land use controls. And every time you see private land use controls, it refers to deed restrictions. So I want you to underline where it says private, underline deed restrictions. Right? And as I mentioned, it is important to note that deed restrictions are placed on property by private parties. Underline, double underline, triple underline, not by governments. It says here, not by governments. Underline, double, triple. Every time you see private, it's the seller. Every time you see deed restrictions, it's the seller. Every time you see private, it's deed restrictions. All means the same, okay? Because only the seller can put a restriction on the buyer, okay? Through the deed. You guys got it? So for instance, an owner might stipulate that only one house may be built on the next door lot that she's selling. As an example, we have two lots. This is my lot, and I'm selling the lot next door. I'm selling it to you, but I'm saying, hey, Victor, you can only build one house. It's a big lot. You can build 2, 3, 4, 5. But when I sell to you, I put a restriction on the deed that says only one. And we talked last week about fee determinable, right? Fee determinable or conditional contingent, the property is yours as long as. So if I put a restriction on the deed that says, Victor, you can only build one house on it, and then you build a second house, what could happen to the title? Revert back to me. Does that make sense? So that's fee determinable as well. I sold it to you with a condition. The other one is this one. It says a grandfather, as an example, could give a house to a grandson with the provision that no intoxicating liquors ever be used on the property. So your grandfather gives you a property, says no alcohol on this property. It's a proper restriction. It's not illegal, right? It's okay for me to restrict you. But who put that restriction? A private party. In this case, the seller. In this case, the grandfather. Does that make sense? But it's always a private party. Now, what would you do if your grandfather gave you a property and said no alcohol on the land? I love his expressions. Like, I would get rid of the house real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, because alcohol is more important than owning the property. They'll give to you for free.
Well,
Huh? No. So you would sell the property right away?
probably look for legal ways to reverse that.
Really, Nancy, right in the morning? So Nancy says he can keep the house. Say it again.
Look for legal, like something illegal to reverse it. Like,
There's no way to reverse it unless you do it through a court. But to do it through a court, that means the person is no longer alive or it was an illegal restriction. Okay? So here's what I want to show you guys. Let's say you assume that, as you said before, you get rid of it right away. You're going to sell it. First of all, the restriction is set up in the deeds that transfers the property by the use of a statement known as restrictive covenants. So every deed has a section that says restrictive covenants. And that is what the previous person placed on it. Okay? Look what it says in green. Unless otherwise stated, it is binding on all future owners. So if you sell that property right away to somebody else, guess what? Let's say you sold it to Rande. He cannot have any alcohol on the land either. You got rid of the problem, you made money, and he's stuck with the problem. Does that make sense?
yeah.
The restriction goes with the property, not with the property owner. You guys remember that from encumbrances? Encumbrances, they go with the property, now the property owner. Okay? Now, the most common restrictions, the most common deed restrictions that we have are placed on the entire subdivision by the original developer to protect certain features that add value to the subdivision, like the size of the lots, the exterior design, or minimum square footage. And we hear this especially in condominiums, right? If you're buying a condo, they say, and we went over this already in chapter 7, they say, hey, you cannot park the car here, or you cannot change the color, the outside color of your door, of your walls. You cannot put for sale signs. So these are restrictions. They'll be placed by private parties again. In this case, the original developer that created that subdivision. Does that make sense? Now, the developer's restrictions may be recorded once with the original map of the subdivision and simply referred to without being restated in the individual deeds when each lot is sold. So sometimes, especially when you're getting into condos or larger private subdivisions, they sell the property to you, and in the deed, under deeds restrictive covenants, it says, please refer to master deed. So there's a bigger and fuller deed with all the bylaws, with all the restrictions for the whole subdivision. You're buying your unit, and it says, please look back at the original one. So we don't have to keep on recording the same restrictions. Does that make sense? Cool. Now, in the past, these restrictions might have forbidden a future sale of the property to a member of a particular religious or ethnic group. Now we know that these are illegal, right? They're a violation of discrimination laws, correct? I'm going to say I'm going to sell to you, but you can never sell or have people of a certain color or nationality in the property. That's illegal discrimination. So those are not enforceable. So such restrictions are now in violation of the laws and are not enforceable. Now, restrictions that prohibit the next owners from selling the property are also not enforceable. What am I saying here? I sell to you, Lucy, and I'm telling you, hey, you will die with the property. You cannot sell to anybody else. You're stuck with it. Now, does that make any sense?
No.
Does anybody remember the 5 ownership rights that we have? Use of the property, possession of the property, enjoyment, exclusion, and disposition or alienation. Under disposition or alienation says we can gift or sell the property. It's one of our fundamental rights when owning property. Again, this is chapter 5 rights. Make it easy. But you guys understand? It's one of our fundamental rights is the ability to sell the property or gift the property. So I cannot restrict you from selling the property or gifting the property. Okay? Some restrictions have a time limitation, so it could be for 25 years, for instance. And frequently, the effective term of restrictions may be extended with the consent of a majority or sometimes of 2/3 of the owners in the subdivision. So to make it simple, if you guys want to, let's say where you live, you want to make a change to what currently exists, you have to have at least 2/3 of the people in the same subdivision to vote for that change. In this case, extension of the term. Got it? Now, when the deed restriction and the zoning provision cover the same subject, the more limiting restriction will prevail. Good evening. Make sure you underline, the more limiting restriction will prevail. So here's an example. It says if deed restrictions say that lots in a subdivision must measure at least 2 acres, but the town allows for half-acre lots, the 2-acre restriction is enforceable. Here's a quick example. we have right here 2 acres of land. We have right here half an acre. Now this one is the subdivider, and this is the town. These are the requirements. Subdivider for this particular subdivision says properties in this area must measure at least 2 acres. And that means 1 house for every 2 acres. The town says we can have 1 house per every half acre. Which one of these two restricts you the most? Which one of these two restricts you or limits you the most?
The 2 acre,
Why?
because it's 1 house every 2 acres for the same amount of land for the other town.
Absolutely.
More.
Because the town says every half an acre you can build a house. I'm learning Japanese, that's why it looks like this. But for every half an acre, we can build a house. So in the same 2 acres, we could build 4. The subdivision in the same 2 acres allows us to build only 1. So we're limited, we're restricted to what we can develop or what we can place on our properties. Does that make sense? Make sure your phones are on silent. Did you guys understand this, the restriction? Okay. Now, let's say, I'll wait until the phones are under control. Is that an iPhone?
What?
Is that an iPhone?
9?
iPhone.
Yes. Doesn't work?
Horrible. Look at that. Doesn't even
I put it.
Right?
Yes. I don't know.
doesn't even respect the
I
rules.
got it 2 weeks ago and I thought, I don't know.
You got it 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
What did you have before? An iPhone as well,
The
or?
same, but 6.
The 6. Oh, 6 was still, still a baby. Still respected a
Yes.
little bit. The 11 grew up and it's...
I don't understand.
Anyway, I'm not an iPhone guy, that's why. All right. Oh, Siri starts talking to me out of the blue. Right?
Apparently she likes it.
Apparently. All right. So, where was I? Did you guys understand this?
Yeah.
Good. So let me give you an example. Let's say this is a big block right here. There's a bunch of properties. They're all the same, 2 acres each, right? Now this lot right here was recently sold. And the owner of this lot goes, we could put more houses here. In fact, we are facing the road here, right? And there's road here as well. So the houses could be like this, with the doors or the entrance right here. Does that make sense so far? In the state exam, it's not going to be this complicated, but I want to that is so funny. So I have Olga goes, anytime I say seriously, Siri comes on. But if I call for Siri, it won't respond. I'm telling you.
That's true. Yeah.
I'm telling you. That's why Android is best, because you have to say Google. Hey, Google. Anyway. Or Alexa. It's way better, because it doesn't go with anything else in the dictionary, does it? Google, I'm not talking to you right now. It's okay. Anyway. So as we're saying, so there's a road and the neighbor decided to put these things here. So the neighbor built right here, another house, another house, another house. What can be done? Can we allow like this? You as neighbors, you're the owners of the other 3 properties. So, Victor, Thunder, and we're gonna have Lucilma. You have the Brazilian squad. So, the question is, are you guys gonna allow this Portuguese person to come here, because they have to be the Portuguese, to come here? I'm gonna keep Elle out of this because she will do things right. But the Portuguese, you don't understand. So are you guys gonna allow?
No, it's blocking the.
It's blocking what?
I mean, it's blocking the road.
No, that was a corner anyway. It was not yours. What would you do? You'd be okay with it? Let me explain what the problem is here. The houses that you bought are in a quiet residential street because 2 acres of land, everything is quieter, correct?
Right.
All right. Your house, you bought it for $750,000. These are a few things that can happen to your properties. One, there's more population, right? Because there's 4 houses instead of 1 right next to yours, right? The other thing is each house here was sold for $300,000. Does anybody see a problem here?
No.
You don't see a problem?
It's bringing the value of your house down.
Perfect. What happened right now, Vander, is that the moment houses near you sold for less than what your property is worth, it drives your price down. Your property is now worth, let's say, $600,000 versus $750,000. We're going to talk about this appraisal principle when we get to chapter 16. It's called regression. So houses near yours, see, land is land, but the house is the house. So there's different valuations for what the structure is to what the land is. You have a bunch of land, but if the houses are similar but in a smaller lot, then how much is your house worth? Less, because it's not about the lot, it's about the house. And what you can do with it. Does that make sense so far? So, again, 2 things happen. Your neighbor, Lucy, just decided to build more houses. Your house values went down. And there's more people. There's more people, there's more crime, there's more resources needed for police department, for education, for all that stuff. Again, stuff we're going to talk about in later chapters, but just to give you an idea, right? Are you guys going to be happy with this? No. So remember I said that the town allows for half an acre, but the subdivision where you guys live, when you bought the house, you knew, and that was the reason you bought the house, is 1 house per every 2 acres. Which one is more enforceable? Which one limits you the most? Which one restricts you the most? So you as neighbors, you can ask Lucia to take these houses down. The town will allow her to build because the town has nothing to do with deed restrictions. The town has to do with codes. Make sense so far? So, and this might be a question in the exam, that's why I'm doing all this. So, and I want you guys actually to highlight this. Neighbors or the original subdivider may enforce deed restrictions through court action. Neighbors or the original subdivider may enforce deed restrictions through court action. Yes?
Question. So, back to that example, if Lucy decides to buy the whole strip for $750,000, but she gets creative and wants to put a hotel right there just because it's a nice day, is that like okay?
It'll be the same thing.
Same thing, even though it's like technically 1 building.
No. It's
No?
residential. Single family only. That's what the subdivision said.
Okay, what about a large B&B? that's technically a house.
Is it a business?
I have
It's
the
commercial.
commercial.
Okay.
Then you're getting into other types of restrictions. We're going to go into that in a second. You're getting to other types of restrictions. Lucille, what you're saying?
I said I have Airbnb.
You have Airbnb? But, okay, so Airbnb is a little different than what she's addressing.
Yeah.
See, Airbnb is turning your houses into hotels or temporary passage through, right? But a B&B, a bed and breakfast, is a house that was converted just for that. Okay? So it's like it's not even a rooming house. Airbnb right now is like a half rooming house, half, it's difficult to describe
Like
Airbnb.
Uber.
Hmm?
Like Uber. You
Like
can
Uber, it's
go
not a-
anytime.
That's what I was going to say. It's like Uber. It's not a taxi, right? But it's
You block the days when you don't want to rent.
that's it. All right. But anyway, so in this scenario, I had a single family house on in the subdivision. When you turn it into a business, it's commercial, and you have to know. That's why the Airbnb was a little exception here to the bed and breakfast itself. When you turn it into a business, you have to know the restrictions of the town. So now it involves something else. Okay? We're talking about simple. This is residential. Lucia bought this lot and decided to divide it into 4. Can she do that? She can. Okay? The answer is yes, she can. Until the neighbors say, no, you can't. Does that make sense? She can because she can go to the town and the town gives the approval because the requirement is minimum ½ acre. That's the only thing that the town will get involved in this scenario, in this particular scenario. Okay? Everything else is whether you guys allow it, the neighbors, or not. If you guys don't allow it, for you to enforce it, you have to go to court and sue Lucy for that. You cannot use threats, violence. You cannot burn down the houses. You cannot do anything like that. You have to go through court. Calling the police is not going to help either. Court. You guys got it? Because you have to present the original documents that say, hey, 2 acres. And the judge is going to force Lucy to bring down those houses and restore the property to its original condition. You guys got it? So in a later chapter, anything that we are transforming about a particular property might require a hearing. Like, for instance, alcohol license. When it's being transferred from one place to another, the neighbors are entitled to say, no, we don't want a business here. You got it? You're residential, we don't want business. So you might not be able to do that bed and breakfast at all. So just addressing that real quick. And now we're going to go into, so that was all private. Now we have government powers. Where it says government powers. Although an individual in the United States has maximum rights in the land that he or she owns, these ownership rights are subject to certain powers or rights held by federal, state, and local government. Please highlight, underline, put stars. Because they are, we are on page 103. Because they are for the general welfare of the community, these limitations on the ownership of real estate supersede the rights of the individual. Because they are for the general welfare of the community, these limitations on the ownership of real estate supersede the rights of the individual. Now, with that, I like to bring always a little story, and somebody's going to tell me this story. Have you ever heard of that story of the 3 little pigs? The 3 pigs and the wolf? You've heard about it? Victor, do you want to explain what the story was?
Yeah.
What? Yes? No?
I've heard about it, but I was very young.
You were very young.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was living with the houses.
He looks like he's 90 now. So you're right. You were very young. All right, Lucy. You want to take it away?
Me?
Yeah. What happened to the 3 pigs and the wolf?
They build houses and put them down. They kept one
Can't put why?
because they were not built right.
They were not built right. Correct. So I'm gonna help you out. Anybody else remembers the story? Ellen, you want to tell me the story?
So there are these 3 adorable pigs.
Oh, there you go. All right, 3 adorable pigs. Go for it.
And they were on a quest just to get their own. And they're like, you know what? We have these ideas. I'm going to make my house like this. They got some lands. One built a house with straw just because they just thought it was lovely. And then the next got some sticks because they're like, you know what? I like the straw idea, but I want to do something a bit more profound. Let me get some sticks. He did that. The next one was like, those ideas sucked. Let me think in advance.
Wait, that's how you tell your kids? Those ideas sucked. You're doing so well, so sweet, sucked. Go ahead. Okay. Go.
So the last pig was like, you know what? I'm going to plan for the future and let's do this right. So he got some bricks. It took him a little while longer. Everybody was laughing at him, but he got it done. The big bad wolf came, was like, oh, I'm starving, you know. Yeah. And then came to the first house with the straw. Pig was like, you can't catch me. And then they went in, well, the pig went and was hiding in his straw house. Thinking he was safe, but no. The wolf huffed, blew it down. He's like, oh no, running away. Anyway, went to his brother's house with the sticks, and they're like, yeah, you know what? That was a good idea you had, but let's go with this idea. So they did that. Terrible idea. Then they ran along to their last brother's house with the bricks, and the brother's like, y'all know y'all was crazy for building houses like that. Do it the right way. That's how it lasts. That's what happened. The wolf came, puff, puff, then caught asthma and everything.
Asthma and everything. Wow. that was a creative explanation of the story. I like it. Anyway, so moral of the story. There's 2 here. At a young age, we don't realize that the things that are being taught to us. One is having a proper foundation. That without a proper foundation, we don't go anywhere because it could collapse, right? You don't start a house from the roof down, right? We start the house from the ground up, so proper foundation. The second thing here, they were teaching you the building codes, which was, if you build a straw house, wind blows it away. Or if there's a fire, quickly, it gets destroyed, and it could affect the houses next to yours. Does that make sense? Sticks, the same thing. That's what we have here in the majority of the United States is sticks. And in some other countries, we focus on brick. It takes longer, but it's stable, right? And if it burns down, then you know what? It'll take a while to burn. So before it reaches the other house, it's contained. Does that make sense? So we're just talking about structures. And what I was trying to say here with this is that even though it was their houses, their property, they could build whatever way they wanted, right? Nobody came and said, I'm going to fine you for building a stick or straw or the brick house. But you can think of the wolf as the home inspector. The wolf came and saw the houses and were like, put it down. You're not up to code. And that's one of the powers that the government has on us. We have full powers. It's our house. But if it's going to affect the general welfare of the public, then we can enforce certain rules. So that's the police power. And this is the power vested in the state to establish legislation to preserve order, protect the public health and safety. Now, the state's power is passed on to municipalities and counties, and the use, please highlight, underline, put stars, the use and enjoyment of the property is subject to restrictions, including what we're going to talk about today, which is environmental protection laws, zoning and building ordinances regulating the use, occupancy, size, location, construction, and rental of real estate. Okay? So the government's telling you what you can or cannot build. You want a single family? Sure. But it has to be up to code. Meaning, and quick example, I always talk about it. A few years ago, you needed a 2x4 every 4 feet. Now, every 4 feet. Is this a sturdy enough structure every 4 feet? No, it looks like it is because we're within these walls, but it's not. So now the code is every 16 inches. There must be a 2x4, right? So it makes it stronger. Does that make sense? Yes? Stronger, safer. And as we evolve, and the construction material and construction standards and the needs evolve, they will change the code. Older houses, they are grandfathered in, so they allow them to keep the way they are. Newer houses have to be built according to the new code. But that's all based on police power, and police power is just rules and regulations that we must follow. You guys understand? What we can do with the house, the use, the occupancy, how many people can live in a certain space, the size of the house or the lot, all that is regulated, okay? Next we have eminent domain. Now, eminent domain enables a government to exercise its right to acquire privately owned real estate for public use through the process of condemnation. Okay? So eminent domain is literally the government saying, hey, vendor, I want your house. You're in Elizabeth, right? So the city of Elizabeth comes to you and says, vendor, I need your house. What are you going to say? No? You can. But through the process of condemnation, they have the right to take your property as long as it's for public good. But they cannot just get there and say, vendor, your house is now mine. They can take your house, but they have to pay you just compensation. So they have to still pay you something for your house. Why would they take your house? As long as it's for public good. Maybe we need a new school, so we're going to take a whole block down and build a new school. Right? Maybe the train station is being moved or needs a bigger lot, so we're going to take it from your property because yours is right next to it, as an example. Are you guys understanding this? So there has to be a need. And if you see what happened to Newark, Harrison, Kearney, Jersey City, there's a lot of, Brooklyn, there's a lot of areas, these are the most recent examples. There's a lot of areas that the property was taken from the private, given to the public. You guys understand? Yes?
But I think they don't pay just compensation.
No,
Just
means fair. It's supposed to be fair compensation. Unfortunately, most of the times you get just compensation. But if you're not happy, Lucilma, here's what you can do. So here's what you can do. If after negotiations, the owner does not agree to the taking, or the fair price cannot be agreed upon, then a condemnation suit can be instituted. If after a condemnation hearing, agreement still not reached, the case could go to Superior Court for trial either by jury or before a judge in an open court. So if you're not happy, what can you do? You can try, keyword, try to fight it. Go after more money. You guys got it? So you know what the answer is? Most of the
I
times,
will not.
most of the times take whatever they're giving you
Yes.
and run. It sucks, but it is what it is.
So
I'm saying most of the times because, like in Harrison, there's only 2 people that I know, one in particular, that fought the city of Harrison and was able to get money for relocation. Okay. Sorry?
Sorry. Doesn't he have twin boys? That man? That gentleman that you're talking about, doesn't he have twin boys?
Maybe. I know the business. It was a business.
Oh, I know. Okay.
Okay. It was a business. It got relocated to a whole different town. But he was the only one with enough money and enough influence and power to try to do something.
Yeah, it was two that do that.
I'm sorry.
The other gentleman too.
Well, that's what I said. There's only two people that I know. I don't know if that's twins or,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what it is. We fight. We can fight, but not everybody has the power to fight. Because if you win, you can force the other party to pay for the legal costs. But if you lose, that's why the banks bully us. That's why the municipalities bully us. The government bullies us because we don't have the power for it. If enough people get together, which people don't get together, you know, it's we the people, but yeah, you take care of yourself. Right? It hasn't been we the people in a very long time.
Oh yeah, it's getting worse.
It's getting worse, yeah. Well, Facebook, we all agree that something is wrong. In real life, yeah. That show on Netflix was really good. Let's go back to it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, next, it says state laws provide for ownership of real estate to escheat or revert, underline escheat, or revert to the state when the owner dies, leaving no will, disposing of his or her estate, and no heirs can be located. So, quick question. Who has a will? Great. So when you die, because you will die and it's normal, right? Guess what happens to everything you own?
The government take
The government will not take it. The government will attempt to distribute, according to something we'll talk in chapter 20. If you guys want to write somewhere there, chapter 20. The government has a law of descent and distribution. So the government will decide who gets what. If it goes to your spouse, if it goes to your children, if it goes to your spouse and children, if it goes to your uncles, and so on, your grandparents, or your parents, and so on, right? So they have a way to distribute. But they are not going to go look for your family or your heirs. So if your heirs don't stand up and come to the government and say, hey, I'm the natural heir of person such and such, then the government holds on to the money, so sells the property, holds on to the money for a year, and if nobody claims after that 1 year, again in chapter 20 we'll go over it, then all that money that you have reverts to the state of New Jersey. So they keep your assets. I mean, for you it doesn't matter because you're gone. But the people that are here, that you worked hard for, right? They get nothing. And the government that has not worked for you, right, gets to keep it. Are you guys understand this? And that is the power of having a will or not. It's either you decide who gets what, or the government decides who gets what. It's either you appoint somebody to distribute, or the government waits for somebody to claim. You see the difference? If you appoint somebody, an executor, let's say I'm the executor, I'm going to call your heir, hey Victor, you are the heir of person such and such? Yes. Great. I'm the executor of his or her estate, and I have to talk to you, so we have to have a meeting because you have an inheritance. So I'm going to reach out to you. The government's going to post in a few newspapers and within the municipality, and that's it. Nobody reads newspapers. Nobody looks at the signs anymore that are posted. Not even driving. Imagine trying to look for something that's written. You see what I'm trying to say? If you don't have a will, get one now. I'm telling you.
Excuse me.
You're excused.
We
I'm
need
just kidding.
a lawyer for will.
No.
Because I heard it, I can't do by myself.
You can.
Yeah. So
That's called a holographic will. We'll talk about that in chapter 20. You can do it by yourself. You don't need anybody to prepare a will for you. Now, what I recommend is if you have properties, if you have business, if you have stock, if it becomes a little bit more complex, then you do what's called estate planning. Estate planning, you're going to look for an attorney that handles estate planning and somebody that does, for instance, somebody like me that will help you, because I also do insurance, right? That will help you prepare for later on. Because look, you have a house, let's say, and you owe $500,000 to that house. What are you going to leave to your kids or to your spouse? Debt? No. Does that make sense? So somebody that has an insurance license would be able to, so the attorney handles the estate planning, but then somebody with a license can help you get enough insurance to cover your debts. Because that's what you should do. If you owe $500,000 on the mortgage, get a life insurance that covers at least the mortgage. Does that make sense? Because when you die, guess what? The mortgage gets paid. But if you die and the mortgage doesn't get paid, then your heirs are going to have to pay it. And it's one less income in the household. So if things are already tough as they are, imagine with one less income. Does that make sense? And that's the idea behind life insurance. Is that when you die, the ones that are left behind don't have to worry about those bills. You guys got it? Questions? No. Who has life insurance? Wow. Okay. How long ago did you get it?
I have life insurance. I did term when I got the house and life I had a couple of years already.
So you have a whole life, you're saying?
Yeah, whole life.
Okay, because term is also life insurance.
No, term, but it's 30 years.
Okay. So you expect to die when?
Who knows?
Because to me, term, that's what it is.
Well, I have both.
No, I know. I'm just saying, for me, term
Oh, yeah.
is what it is. Term is, I'm going to die in 30 years, so let me cover for 30 years. Right?
Right.
But if you have, so when do I recommend term? When you can't afford anything else. Term is the cheapest form of policy. So now you got the whole life, which is great, to complement the term. So if you die within 30 years, it's that one plus the whole life. If you outlive the term policy, the term ends, but at least you got your whole life covered. All right, so that's the idea behind it. You should always have one to balance the other one out. All right? But again, that's a different story.
If I have life insurance for 20 years
Mhm.
and I don't pass away on 20 years, I lost the money.
If your policy has ROP, which is return of premium, then you should get back at least what you spent in premiums, okay, minus a small fee. But if you don't, if it's a term policy and you don't have return of premium, yeah, you outlive the
So I
policy.
have the option.
Not all policies do.
Right.
So you got to read what your policy has. So if you have a life insurance policy, you can bring it. I'll review it for free. No obligations, nothing. I'll just look at it and let you know what you have.
My kids have it too.
Yeah. Perfect. They have a term or whole life?
Whole life.
Perfect. I'm not a fan of whole life, but I hate term. So there's other options.
I have to take one because I have seen a lot of people pass away and the family get a problem.
I know.
I
Happened to
have
me.
in Brazil, but
I have grandchildren.
the dollar is almost 5, so it's nothing.
Listen, luckily my mom had life insurance 8 years ago when she passed away, almost 9. She had life insurance. It helped me with a lot of stuff and I needed to handle. Since then, my grandfather died, my uncle died, and I'm stuck with the debt. I'm the one having to handle the whole thing.
Yeah,
So,
very expensive.
Wait, what?
no, I'm stuck with that because my grandfather bought a house several years ago and I'm not going to get rid of the house. There's equity, it's almost paid off, but I'm stuck with it. Because it's either I sell, right, or I keep it. And that's how I have to keep it. So, but all I'm trying to say with this is life insurance is great because it covers that portion. All right, so if you have $500,000 worth of debt, you should have at least $500,000 term, at least. And I'm not counting your income. But you should have also your income for a certain amount of years covered. Because it takes several years for that loss to be adjusted in the person that stays behind. So usually we like to look at 10 years. So if you make $100,000 a year, you should have $1 million policy, as an example. So 10 years at least. Does that make sense? So anyway, those are things to talk about later. What I wanted to show you here real quick is this. government powers. We have Pete. We just went over this. I love acronyms, by the way. So we have police power. We have eminent domain. Taxation, which we covered last week, right? And we have escheat. These are the government powers. Right? Again, law of acronyms. So it's an easy way to remember. Good? Yes? Okay, so now we have public land use controls. And public land use controls, it says our large urban population and the increasing demands placed in our limited natural resources have made it necessary for municipalities to increase their limitations on the private use of real estate. We now have controls over noise, air, and water pollution and population density. Regulations on privately owned real estate include planning, zoning, subdivision regulations, codes that regulate building construction, safety, and public health, and environmental protection legislation. Now we're going to go in detail to all of these. We're going to start with planning. Now, why do we plan? Who can tell me? Why do we plan?
An idea more or less of what you want to do.
Say it louder, please.
So you have an idea more or less of what you want to do?
Let me restructure that. We have an idea of what we want to do. That's a goal, that's an objective. And we plan to figure out how to get there. Because you don't plan to figure out what you want to do. You want to do this. How do I get there? And that's the planning portion. You guys got it? So, I'll give you an example. Municipality. Do you think Brooklyn, Newark, Harrison, Jersey City, do you think all these developments happened, hey, I want to build something tomorrow, and boom, they're up? Anybody?
No.
No. Some of these developments have been in the works for 10 years, 20 years. On paper, they've been existing for a very long time, on paper. But they're only being developed now. Do you guys understand? Yes? And to make things simple, is there anything, let's say, something that you accomplished this year, or are accomplishing this year, that you've been planning for the last 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years? Is there anything that you accomplished recently? Or anything that you're looking to accomplish in the next year or two? Anything? Yes? No? Maybe? Do you have stuff? Because I have a bunch of stuff. I have a bunch of plans. I have a bunch of goals, objectives, right? Some I'm accomplishing this year, still finishing the year strong. Some of them I will accomplish at the beginning of the year. Some of them are from 2 years from now, and I have plans all the way up to the next 10 years so far. I don't know about beyond that right now, right? But those are plans. So, okay, Olga's saying buying a house. That's a plan, right? But there's a lot of people that want to buy a house and don't know how to. Buying a house is not something that's going to be overnight. It's not going to be, hey, I want to buy a house, and tomorrow you're inside the house. No, you have to plan, right? You need to figure out what the budget is. You need to figure out where do you want to live? This is all part of planning. It's like a big puzzle. We put the pieces together, right? And then you accomplish. All right, and the next plan that Olga has is within the next 3 to 5 years, move to Portugal. I'm with you on that. So next 3 to 5 years, move to Portugal. Can it happen? If you plan and execute your plans, all right? So with that being said, there's something that actually, let me put it this way. Let's assume 10 years ago, you looked at Newark or Jersey City, the best examples, Harrison as well, but Newark and Jersey City, they're the ones that changed in value way more than Harrison did. Harrison did increase, but not like Newark or Jersey City. So if you knew 10 years ago what Newark or Jersey City were going to be today, would you have invested?
Oh, yeah.
Would you have found a way to get that money and invest? You're saying, oh yeah, why?
Had a chance. Didn't believe that.
You didn't believe in it. That was me with Jersey City. They told me invest in Jersey City. I'm like, I don't know about that. I know Newark. Let me stay here, right? But I didn't invest in Jersey City. And I had a 4-family there that I could have bought for $230,000. Roughly 10 years ago. Crazy, right?
Now,
And now, that house was destroyed. A new house was built, zoned for 4-family, right? And it's worth a little bit over 1.2 million. And I could have bought it for
So you
230.
should.
I should have.
okay.
But I didn't know back then, and I didn't care to research because I focused pretty much on one market, and this market has been great for me, which is Newark, right? So I didn't invest there. But I've made that money or part of that money with investments here in Newark. So my question is, if you knew the future, how would that change your life?
For better.
Or for worse, but that's when we're getting married. Oh, for better, you're saying. Your life would be better because you knew the future. You knew where to gamble. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. It's very easy. All you got to do is go to your city, the town where you want to invest, and ask for the comprehensive master plan or the general plan, because that is the future. They put it on paper. It's been in the works for years. If you want to develop something, you got to get approved. And this will be chapter 18. We're going to talk about subdivisions, developments. We put with the town to see if it fits their master plan. If it fits their master plan, that they include my development in the town's plan. So you will know what's about to happen. For the next, some towns have for 100 years already. A plan for 100 years. Imagine that.
Crazy.
It is.
So, question. Let's say you go and get a master plan and you present your ideas to City Hall. They totally love your plan. Will they give you funding?
Who?
The government. Like, example, if you want to build an Aldi's, right? It's great for the neighborhood. It's really cool. Will they give you like a private contract to do that?
So those are different types of, okay, so there's the municipal planning. So you're asking me for something that's not related to what we're saying here, but I can say this. If you have investors that have plans like that, or if you're the investor that has plans like that and you want to build something, doesn't matter what's happening, there's always grants for certain things. Always. What you need first is a grant writer. You're not the one that's going to apply for it. I mean, you're the one that's going to apply for it, but you're not the one that's going to write the request. So you need a professional grant writer. And they know how to get $20,000 or how to get $2 million towards your project. Does that make sense? All right. There's private investors. If you have a good enough executive summary and a business plan, there's investors that will invest in your dreams. The SBA will also get you these types of loans. But what we're saying here is, as a realtor, not as an investor, but as a realtor primarily, how would this change your life? Because right now you're taking the salesperson license. So that's what I want you to focus on. And there's people that will come with ideas, like Ella was saying, right? And you want to be able to tell those people, well, your idea is great. I don't think this is the block for you to do it. Because in the next 10 years, this is what's happening around it. And it will affect the value of your property. Does that make sense? Or usability of your property. Or how the zoning is proposed to be changed. So the idea about having a master plan is not, remember, we're salespeople now. Put yourself in those shoes first, because that's what this course is all about. So the idea is if an investor comes, or if a buyer comes, a regular buyer comes, and they say, I want to buy here, you should be ready, and you should know, it's part of your duties, we talked about this in chapter 3, it's your duties to know everything about the property, right? Don't you think the conditions around the property are part of what the property is? We talk about off-site conditions, right? So if you know that there's a factory being built right next to the house that your client wants to buy, shouldn't you tell your buyer, hey, in about 5 years, they're planning on building a factory next door? Shouldn't you tell that to your client? All right, and that's where the master plan comes in. All right, and I'll tell you this because in Harrison, it did happen to a good friend of mine. He bought a business there. The realtor knew and the seller knew what was happening in Harrison. He bought a business there, and then here came eminent domain 2 years later, and they took the whole building out, including the business, obviously. So he invested money into the property, into the business. Do you think he made his money in 2 years? No. And this is where you guys come in. He could have, and I think he did, I actually never, no, he did. Sorry, not this, I'm thinking about something else. He did sue and was able to recover some monies, but not all the money. Okay? Guys, you can get sued for not knowing this stuff. It's your job to know everything and anything that's happening
Who did he sue?
to the business. I'm sorry?
Who did he sue in particular?
Everybody involved in the transaction. The seller, the realtors, the attorneys. Everybody knew what was going on. If the attorneys did not, then they didn't do their job either. You guys understand? When you sue, you want to sue everybody in the chain. I'm just saying. If you know their attorney, sue their attorney as well. So you catch them off guard. I'm telling you, it's like breaking a leg. Changes everything. Anyway, so what you guys should have always is the master plan of the market that you're going to be involved in. Very, very important. Okay? Now, municipalities and counties develop master plans to ensure that social and economic needs are balanced against environmental and aesthetic concerns. Let's go to zoning. Zoning. We already talked about zoning, so just highlight for now. Zoning is where they determine the size of the lots, what type of structure can be built there, all that good stuff. And often, the purpose of zoning is to implement a local master plan. So today, an area is zoned for residential, tomorrow it could be commercial. Today it's industrial, tomorrow it could be residential. It is all determined based on the town needs and how they're moving and flowing towards the next years, right? In fact, zoning ordinances generally divide land use into 5 classifications, and you need to know these 5. Residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, and recreational. Zoning ordinances generally divide land use into 5 classifications. You need to know. If it's residential, what are we talking about? Homes, right? Houses, right? Commercial, what are we talking about? Business. I don't know if you guys want to write that in front of it, but businesses. What about industrial? Factories, manufacturing, right? Institutional? Schools, hospitals, for instance. And recreational? Parks. So you need to know, because when you look at the map, at the master plan, or the zoning map of the town, it says this is zoned for residential. Here we are mixed use. Where we are right now is mixed use because we have residential, and on this side we have commercial and residential. So it's mixed use. Does that make sense? So you need to know when you're looking at a property, what are they zoned for? On the right-hand side on top, we have exclusionary zoning. Exclusionary zoning. Right up above exclusionary zoning, I want you to write poor. P-O-O-R. Poor. This is just to remind you guys of Mount Laurel 1 and 2. We talked about this in chapter 4, where Mount Laurel was trying to exclude low and moderate income families out of suburban communities. You guys remember this? Chapter 4? Now, because of those laws, those lawsuits actually, Mount Laurel decisions mandate master plans and zoning that provide for a mix of housing types within the community. So what we're saying here is that every developing community must abide by these rules and have a space set aside for low and moderate income. We cannot reject people that are developments for people that are low and moderate income. Okay? Next we have non-conforming use. So conforming means it goes according to guidelines, okay? Or according to standards. Non-conforming obviously means it goes against the standards, right? So, a frequent occurrence is a building that does not conform to the zoning use because it was erected before the enactment of the zoning law. So let's look at this building right here. Let's assume that this building is strictly commercial. What if the zoning tomorrow changes to residential? What if the zoning changes to residential? Do we have to change the building to be residential? No. It says right here that such non-conforming use is allowed to continue. It's grandfathered. Now, if this building use is abandoned, right, or the building is torn down or destroyed, then any new structure must comply with the new zoning. So if it's currently in use as commercial, nobody changes it. If it's abandoned or the building is torn down, the new building must go according to the current zoning. So it must be residential, any new building. Does that make sense?
How long is the grandfather clause? Is there a certain number of years? Or
Yeah, until the use is abandoned or the building is torn down or destroyed. So as long as nothing changes to the current structure, it is allowed to continue. Could be 100 years, but that's what it is.
Quick question. So if somebody bought a house,
Mhm.
like I sold a house to somebody in a residential area,
Okay.
and then they changed it to a commercial, and then that person, like within 5 to 6 years,
Okay.
no, let's put it 10, if they changed it and they knew about it, can they still sue or no?
If I know about the change, yeah, you could get sued. Anything you know about, you could get sued.
If I told
When you
the
don't know
person-
about it, you can get sued.
And even if I told them when they bought it,
If you told them, then there was disclosure. No.
okay. So
If
I
there's
have
disclosure-
to put it down disclosure, everything that I talked to them, like, well, laws.
Whatever you know should be disclosed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
disclosed meaning written down and signed by all parties?
Technically, yes. So even verbal disclosure is okay. It's just not as strong as written. So if you put it in writing, you're protecting yourself better. Yeah.
So it's always good to put like those kind of.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. So it's something to present to the attorneys and let the attorneys battle it out. Okay. Now, zoning board. You guys remember when we talk about taxes that if you're not happy with taxes, you could appeal, right? You can go to the, instead of taxation board, you can go to the zoning board and file a petition to change the zoning for your property, all right? This must be presented to the Board of Adjustments for exceptions to the zoning law. And these petitions are called zoning variations. Each time a plan is created or a zoning ordinance enacted, some owners are inconvenienced and want to change the use of a property. Now, generally, such owners may appeal for a variance from existing regulations to allow a use that does not meet the zoning requirements. A variance may be sought by a property owner who has suffered hardship as a result of a zoning ordinance. So, you cannot request a variance just because. You cannot just go there, hey, I want to change this. For you to get a variance is because you need to get a variance, because there's a hardship. For example, if an owner's lot is leveled next to the road, right, but slopes steeply 30 feet back from the road, the zoning board may be willing to allow a variance so that the owner can build closer to the road than normally would be allowed. All right? So, for instance, this is the road and you're right here, but there's steep slope, right? You can build closer to the road so you don't have to deal with that decline. Okay? But that means there's a hardship. There's something going on. Especially, when it freezes, do you want to go down that road? No. All right, we're going to skip subdivision regulations because that's chapter 18. And we'll go in detail there. Building codes, we're also going to go in detail in chapter 18, but for now I want to go over this. Building codes. It says municipalities have enacted ordinances to specify construction standards that must be met when repairing or erecting buildings. This is the story of the three pigs. These are called building codes, and they require, they set requirements for kinds of materials, so the straw, the sticks, the brick, right? The kinds of materials, sanitary equipment, electrical wiring, fire prevention standards, and the like. The building code is to prevent stuff from happening, right? Now, most communities, not all, most, require the issuance of a building permit by a building department or other authority before a person can build a structure or alter or repair an existing building on property within the municipality. So, most communities require the issuance of building permits before you can do any change to the property, right? Why do we need a building permit? Because through the building permit requirement, officials can verify compliance with building codes and zoning ordinances. They just want to make sure that when you present the plans, everything is according to the town requirements, right? After the new structure has been inspected and found satisfactory, the inspector issues a certificate of occupancy. We call it CO, right? Or for an altered building, a certificate of compliance. You guys good so far? Yes? Certificate of occupancy means it's okay to occupy. Everything is deemed safe. Where it says environmental issues, I want you guys to go, to the right-hand side on top. It says hazardous substances. We're going to start with asbestos. Now, I don't want you guys to highlight. What I want you to do right here, I'm going to teach you how to highlight this section. I want you to put a box around it, and you're going to highlight only what's in green. You put a box around, and you highlight only what is in green. Because asbestos was a type of insulation banned in 1978. That's what you need to remember. Asbestos, insulation, banned in 1978. You got it? Yes? Perfect. Next paragraph. Highlight what's in green. So it says, so long as asbestos containing poses a little risk. However, please highlight, when disturbed, as often occurs during renovation or remodeling, older asbestos fibers break down into tiny filaments and particles, a condition known as friable. Now, when these particles become airborne, it poses risk to humans. So your problem is not the asbestos as it is. The problem is once it starts deteriorating, once you start during renovations, right? It breaks down into tiny, like hair, right? It's so tiny and you can inhale it. When you inhale it, it could lodge in your lungs and cause problems. Okay? Now, what was it used for? It was used for insulation to cover pipes, ducts, heating, and hot water units in residential and commercial properties. At the bottom, it says asbestos is costly to remove because process requires state licensed technicians and specially sealed environments. Can you remove asbestos by yourself? The answer is no. You got to have state licensed or certified technicians. Next page. Encapsulation or sealing off of disintegrated asbestos is an alternate method of asbestos control which may be preferable to removal in certain circumstances. Encapsulation or sealing. So make sure that we're not taking it out, we're sealing it away. Okay? Yes?
Question. Originally, what is asbestos? Is it like some type of rock? Is it some type of...
Insulation. It's like, almost like a spongy thing.
Like a foam, right?
Almost.
Like that's hard.
Yeah, harder though. It's insulation. It's not a rock, it's insulation.
I mean,
So if you go to, okay,
I'll look it up on Google.
hold on.
How was asbestos harvested in order to put into the house for installation purposes? Was it like, did you have to mine it? Like,
It's not important for the exam,
okay.
but it says right here, it's a component of more than 3,000 types of building materials. So they take it, break it down into tiny particles, and then bond them all together. It becomes, so if you look at older pipes in your basement, for instance, there's something covering those pipes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can touch them. It's an insulation, so you can touch those pipes when you're working. You don't burn, right? But that's what it is. A little sponge they see around it, and then usually there's foil or rubber around it. Okay, but for state exam, not important at all how you got them. Okay. All right, where were we? Lead-based paint. All right, the next one: lead-based paint and other lead hazards. An elevated level of lead in the body can cause serious damage to the brain, kidneys, nervous system, and red blood cells on anyone, but especially in children under the age of 6 who are still developing. The degree of harm is related to the amount of exposure and the age at which the person is exposed. Remember I told you yellow? Just put a box around it. Don't waste your highlighters here.
I thought of that. I was just like,
On the right-hand side, it says lead-based paint may be on the interior or exterior surface, but is particularly common on doors, windows, and other woodwork in much of the housing constructed before 1978. And that's where we're going to focus now, all the way at the bottom. It says the use of lead-based paint was banned in 1978, underlined with stars, arrows, bubbles. You got to remember, lead-based paint was banned in 1978. Now, No federal law requires a homeowner's test for the presence. I'm going to break this one down. I need your help here. I need you to pay attention. It says no federal law requires homeowners to test for the presence of lead-based paint. So if you're the owner of a house built before 1978, do you need to test? No. Are you mandated to test? No. You guys got it? You're not required to. But under the Lead-Based Paint Hazard Reduction Act, persons selling or leasing residential housing constructed before 1978, please underline, double underline, triple underline, put arrows, bubbles, stars, whatever you have to put, must disclose the presence of, circle, known lead-based paint. Sellers, landlords, you are not required to test for it, but if you know about it, you're required to disclose. You guys got it? Yes, no, maybe? Okay? Very, very important. There might be two questions in the school or state exam. One is, are you required? The other one is, if you know about it. Are you required? The answer is no. If you know about it, must you disclose? The answer is yes. You guys got it? And here comes our part. Next page. It says, a lead hazard pamphlet must be distributed to all buyers and tenants, and the lead-based paint disclosure statement must be attached to all sales contracts and leases regarding residential properties built before 1978. Underline, double underline, triple underline, put stars around this whole section, put arrows around this whole section. You must know. This is a guaranteed question. And if it's not a question in the exam, it will be for the rest of your realtor life. Okay? If it's built before 1978, you must include a statement in the contract, which usually is there, and you must give an additional pamphlet. The copy of the pamphlet is right above you, which is protect your family from lead in your home, the pamphlet. Okay? Did you guys understand that? Yes? Perfect. Now, purchasers must be given 10 days in which to conduct risk assessments or inspections for lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards. Purchasers are not bound by any real estate contract until the 10 days have expired. So you must be given 10 days to conduct assessments. Now my question is, who enforces or who makes sure that those 10 days are being respected? Say it louder.
Attorney.
Who?
The attorney. You know, so
So it says right here, the regulations specifically require you guys, not attorneys, not home inspectors, not the buyers, not the sellers. It says real estate agents. It doesn't say who you represent. It says, hey, if the house is built before 1978, you must make sure that everybody is aware of this law and comply with this law. Okay? So if you represent the seller, you got to enforce on the buyer side that they sign the disclosures and are allowed the 10 days. If you represent the buyer, you got to make sure the seller presents a lead-based paint disclosure where it says either I know or don't know about it. Does that make sense? Okay. On the right-hand side on top, we have radon. Radon. are you highlighting? Radon is a type of radioactive gas. But what you need to remember is right at the bottom, it says, when radon enters buildings and is trapped in high concentrations, usually in basements with inadequate ventilation, it can cause health problems. Okay? That's what you need to remember when it's trapped in high concentrations. Bless you.
Thank you.
Now, remediation is indicated if radon levels measure 4 PCIs or more. 4 PCIs or more. Look what it says. Recent evidence suggests that radon may be the most underestimated cause of lung cancer, particularly for children, individuals who smoke, and those who spend considerable time indoors. Just one more thing before I make a statement. It says right here, because radon is odorless, colorless, and tasteless, it is impossible to detect without testing. You guys ever heard that you should not rent basements? Yes? Does anybody know why? Say louder. Because of toxins in the basement. Okay. Sorry. Because of toxins in the basement. Okay. What toxins?
Yeah. The boiler, the machinery.
Radon. Look what it says right on top. When it's trapped in high concentrations, usually where?
Basements.
It can cause serious health problems. Then it says it's the most underestimated cause of lung cancer. And then it says it's odorless, colorless, and tasteless. So it's impossible to detect. Are you guys understanding this?
Mm-hmm.
This one and carbon monoxide are the two main reasons why we can't rent basements. Because usually they have improper ventilation. And then it's also a fire hazard. If it's a fire, you're trapped. There's not enough room for the fire to escape, so it stays concentrated right there. Does that make sense? In fact, basements, when you do the fire inspection, the smoke certification, the basements, they tell you right away you cannot have locks in the basement. The doors have to be open freely. Again, in case of emergency.
Radon is flammable?
I'm sorry?
Radon is highly flammable?
So that's not the issue here? No. The issue here is it is a gas, and in high concentrations it makes you difficult to breathe. Okay, no, I'm just letting you know. So it's the breathing portion and how it shuts. See, when we're sleeping, that's the biggest problem. When we're sleeping, your brain kind of like slows down, right? So your heart doesn't need as much work. Everything slows down. So the response to certain things is delayed, right? That's why we need alarms, like carbon monoxide alarm or the fire alarm, is for your brain to respond to things. But for radon, there's no alarm. It has to be tested constantly. Now, here's the thing. Radon is everywhere. Right now, amongst us is radon. The question is, what is the level of radon that we have right here? The question is, what is the ventilation that we have? See, the door is constantly being open, constantly being closed, and we're active, we're alert. So we're not sleeping. It makes a big difference. Does that make sense? So, it says right here, radon levels vary depending on the amount of fresh air that circulates through the house, the weather conditions, and the time of the year. And as it says right here, it is relatively easy to reduce levels of radon by installing ventilation systems or exhaust fans. As long as there's proper circulation, you should be okay. Again, basements, do we have proper ventilation? No. Right? Some of you guys, you buy houses, or your clients buy houses, and they say, I'm gonna rent the first floor, second floor, and I'm gonna live in the basement. I'm gonna make a lot of money. I hope that a lot of money you're making is not causing you health problems. Again, radon, very dangerous, okay? And as far as the furnace, as you were saying before, that's the carbon monoxide.
If there's no random, it's okay.
If there's no what?
No, is the word?
Radon?
Radon.
But how do you know there's no radon? Every house has radon. Every single house in Jersey. I'm gonna show you in a second.
Level.
Mhm.
If the inspection goes there, and the
You should once a year just do a test to see. It doesn't cost much, like $80.
How do you test it?
But it's a little canister that you put in the basement. But anyway, so $80 or whatever it is to get the test done.
Okay.
If you use the inspector, it's like $200, but the canister itself, sending to the labs and all that, is like $80.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I didn't
I have to do that.
Yeah. Now, remember I said that it's a gas, a natural gas, it's everywhere? All right, because of that, it says right here, according to New Jersey state law, a seller must reveal to a prospective buyer the results of all radon testing and any mitigation work when the contract of sale is entered into. It's not at listing. We're not going to say, hey, we have radon. Do you want to buy this house? No. But once you put a contract, an offer, right, and we agree to it, hey, by the way, thank you for putting an offer. By the way, we have radon, high levels of radon. In fact, the Real Estate Commission advises sellers agents that have the duty to keep confidential, meaning you guys cannot disclose information about radon test results until contract of sale is entered into, unless the seller has authorized the agent in writing to discuss the matter with buyers. Why? Because again, it's a natural gas. It's everywhere. It's not something that's fixable easy. Does that make sense? It's something that must be taken care of, yes, but with proper ventilation. In my house, everything is airtight. There's no cold coming in, there's no hot coming in, doesn't go out. That's dangerous, isn't it? We keep our windows closed because it's Jersey. So you open the window for 5 minutes, everything was good, and then all of a sudden it's raining. Or all of a sudden it's really cold, or it's very windy. Does that make sense? So a lot of people don't even open windows. So there's no ventilation whatsoever. But in your house, it might be different. Maybe you have the windows open and doors open all day long. You guys got it? It's one of those things that it's there, it's present, so it doesn't affect the sale. Yes? Okay. Now, urea formaldehyde. All I need to know about this is type of insulation.
How do you pronounce that?
Urea formaldehyde. UFFI.
You really learned Chinese.
Yeah, Kamingling, urea formaldehyde. All right, so I'm just going to show you here real quick. This is radon on page 109. You see it? Look where we are. What is it? Is it lighter or darker? Not too light, not too dark. Now I want you. Now I want you guys to go to the bottom of that page. What did I do? Sorry. But I want you guys to go to the bottom of that page and see right here. In case you guys have not noticed, the whole New Jersey has radon. The question is it low radon potential, moderate radon potential, or high radon potential? And this is the reason why we cannot disclose this type of information until there's a contract. Because the whole Jersey has it. You got it? Any questions? Yes, no, maybe? Great. So moving forward, mold. Does everybody know what mold is? Yes? So with that being said, if everybody knows what mold is, just highlight or put a box around this section. Good? Yes? At the bottom, when listing a house, licensees should look for signs of moisture or standing water and ask homeowners if they know of any mold in the home. So it's our job to look for certain water conditions. If they're present, then we should advise the buyers to have an inspection to determine if mold exists. Okay? It's our job, guys, to look around. It says when listing a house, it doesn't say representing the buyer, right? When listing a house, that means you represent the seller. If there's existing mold or water moisture signs, anything like that, it must be disclosed. Carbon monoxide, everybody knows what it is, so I just want you to highlight the green section, and then the rest you can just put a box around it. Good.
How can you treat like carbon monoxide?
I'm sorry?
How can you treat it? Like get rid of it? Because like those fire alarms, like ones. Oh, there you go.
Just like radon, it just has to be properly ventilated. So if it's trapped, I'll give you an example. Have you heard of death in the winter by carbon monoxide? There's a lot of people, that's why now it's a crime, they turn on their cars, they stay in the car as it warms up. And instead of removing the snow, they wait for the car to warm up while they're inside, and the snow is going to melt away, they say. A lot of people don't wake up before the snow melts, because the carbon monoxide is inside. Just like when you're in the garage. You don't turn on your car while in the garage. Carbon monoxide stays trapped. So how do you resolve carbon monoxide issues? Proper ventilation. If you're in the street, carbon monoxide doesn't get trapped. If you open the window just a little bit, at least it escapes. But no, people leave everything closed. So just like radon, once it's trapped in high concentrations, it becomes dangerous. All your devices at home, right? Your stove, furnace, as you said, the forced air unit, all that stuff produces carbon monoxide. But it's not in high levels. You guys understand this? All right, so the only problem is if it's burning, if it's not burning, all that. Now right here, New Jersey requires carbon monoxide detectors in every dwelling unit where the building contains 3 or more units. New Jersey requires carbon monoxide detectors in every dwelling unit where the building contains 3 or more units. Okay? We're going to skip EMFs, and I want you to go to water. I just want you to highlight exactly as it is here, and focus on the fact that surface water can be absorbed into groundwater, the part that's in green. absorbed into groundwater. Any contamination of the underground water can threaten the supply of pure, clean water for private wells or public water systems. Private wells or public water systems. Last paragraph says, New Jersey's Private Well Testing Act applies to every contract of sale where the source of potable water is from an on-site private well or under certain conditions an off-site well. It mandates testing of the act in accordance, testing of the water in accordance with the act. Now, closing, please highlight, underline, put stars, arrows, bubbles. Closing may not take place unless both the buyer and seller certify in writing that they have received and reviewed a copy of the test results. And the law also applies to rented properties. You guys got it? Yes? So if there's a private well, it must be tested before there's a closing. Okay? Underground storage tanks, I want you to go to the next page. And it says, in residential areas, and I'm sorry, there's not many examples here in this section. I hate this section because it's mainly just pointing out a few things rather than, hey, this is what you could do or do that or whatever. No. Strictly info. Sorry. In residential areas, they are used to store heating oil. So the oil tanks, right? And some tanks are currently used, but many are long forgotten. Over time, however, neglected tanks may leak hazardous substances into the environment. This permits contaminants to pollute not only the soil around the tank, but also adjacent parcels and groundwater. So if there's a leak in an oil tank, it could damage your property and somebody else's property. So licensees, you guys, should be particularly alert to the presence of fill pipes, vent lines, stained soil, fumes or odors, any of which may indicate the presence of a UST. Okay? Any questions? No. Great. Because detection, removal, and cleanup of surrounding contaminated soil can be an expensive operation. All the way at the bottom, we have comprehensive environmental response, compensation, and liability act, CERCLA. It says right here, the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, Liability Act, or CERCLA, established a $9 billion fund called the Superfund. Please highlight, underline, put stars. To clean up uncontrolled hazardous waste sites and to respond to spills. Now, it also created a process for identifying potential responsible parties, and these are the PRPs. I want you to underline potential responsible parties and circle or underline PRPs. Because every time you see PRP, you must know it's potential responsible party. And ordering them to take responsibility for the, right on top, cleanup action. Now, liability, highlight what's in green. It said that a landowner is liable. Sir, actually, do me a favor before we highlight what's in green. I want to show you here, so pay attention to the screen. We're going to highlight the whole section, so might as well put a box around it. Just put a box around it. And we highlight what's in green, okay? Just put a box around the whole liability section, and then we highlight what's in green. So landowner is liable under CERCLA when a release or threat of release of a hazardous substance has occurred on his or her property. Regardless of whether the contamination is a result of the landowner's actions or those of others, the owner can be held responsible for the cleanup. So it doesn't matter who caused the contamination. You are a homeowner, you have to clean up. It sucks. Now, this liability includes not only the cleanup of the landowner's property, but also neighboring property that has been contaminated. So not only are you cleaning yours, you're cleaning everybody else's. And look what it says. A landowner who is not responsible for the contamination can seek recovery, reimbursement for the cleanup from previous landowners, any responsible party, or the superfund. However, if the other parties are not available, even a landowner who did not cause the problem could be solely responsible for the costs. I know, it sucks. But it gets better. Once the EPA determines that hazardous materials have been released into the environment, it is authorized to begin remediation. First, it attempts to identify PRPs. Who are the PRPs? Potential responsible parties, like who did this? They'll try to identify. If the PRPs agree to cooperate to the cleanup, they must agree how to divide the cost. If the PRPs do not, I know, but if you do not voluntarily undertake the cleanup, the EPA may hire its own contractors and do the necessary work. Of course. So here's the thing. You could have done it for like $20,000. They're going to hire their union workers, and it costs $50,000. But it gets better. The EPA is going to send you the bill, of course. You could have done it for $20,000. Now you got a $50,000 bill. And if you refuse to pay, the EPA can take you to court and seek damages for up to 3 times the actual cost of the cleanup. So instead of 50, well, let me rephrase that. Instead of 20, they're now suing you for 150,000.
That's crazy.
It is, but it gets better. It says right here, liability under the Superfund is considered to be strict, joint and several, and retroactive. What does that mean? That it's you, and you. Why is this? Because if you own property in a single block, as an example, you and your neighbors are general partners. You share liability. Strict, joint and several, and retroactive. Strict liability means that the owner is responsible to the injured party with no excuse. Joint and several means that each of the individual owners is personally responsible for the total damages. And if only one of the owners is financially able to handle the total damages, that owner must pay the total and collect the proportionate shares from the other owners whenever possible. Just like a general partnership. If I'm the only one that can pay the lawsuit, I pay for everything and then I have to resolve it with you guys. Same thing. And retroactive means the liability is not limited to the current owner. It also includes people who have owned the site in the past. So you can go after previous owners if it was caused before your ownership. Crazy, right? Who wants to be a homeowner?
Yeah.
No, not anymore? Well, here's good news. In 1986, Sarah was born. Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act. So one of the things is they have stricter or stronger cleanup standards and also 5 times the funding of the original Superfund. The other thing is that the amendment also sought to clarify obligation of lenders. As mentioned, liability under the Superfund extends to both the present and all previous owners of the contaminated site. Now, real estate lenders, so banks, found themselves either as present owners or somewhere in the chain of ownership through foreclosure proceedings. The amendment created also a concept called innocent landowner immunity. It was recognized that in certain cases, a landowner in the chain of ownership was completely innocent of all wrongdoing and therefore should not be held liable. It took 6 years for them to realize, wait a minute, these people are paying for something they didn't do. Right? 6 years. They must have gotten sued so many times, right? Now, the innocent landowner immunity clause established criteria by which to judge whether a person or a business could be exempted from liability. And the criteria included: the pollution was caused by a third party. Is that your fault? No. The property was acquired after the fact. Is that your fault? No. Right? So if we can prove pretty much that it was somebody else, not you, and you did everything possible to assess the property, then you shouldn't be held liable. Does that make sense? All right. At the bottom we have ISRA. We're almost done, so final run over here, okay? ISRA and the Wetlands Protection Act. So as you guys highlight, this talks about owning land near the water, okay? Mainly near the water, right? So we have riparian rights, littoral rights. You guys remember this? Riparian and littoral, when you own water, okay? We have subsurface rights, air rights, and water rights. Yes? Chapter 5.
Yes.
Thank you, Lucilma. I appreciate your help. Okay. So here's the thing. If there's a factory, every time there's a change of ownership, it must be tested for chemicals, right? Because every manufacturing uses some type of chemical. So this is mainly designed to protect the water through the Wetlands Act of 1970. Okay? Under this act, the Department of Environmental Protection regulates certain activities in designated wetland areas. Riparian owners, so people that own property next to the river, right, who wish to conduct any of the regulated activities, must apply to the Commissioner of Environmental Protection for a permit. So you cannot just do whatever you want. You have to get a permit to do stuff by the water, including erect manufacturing, processing, or housing facilities in the coastal area that might tend to pollute the marine environment. You guys got it? To finalize, on the right-hand side on top, landmark preservation. If it's historical, so right above landmark, I want you to write historical. If it's historical or landmark preservation districts, they restrict what you can do on the outside of the property. So let's say you're buying a property that's deemed a landmark or historical. Inside the property, you can do whatever you want. Outside the property, you must look exactly the same way it looked 100 plus years ago. You guys got it? Yes? If it's deemed historic, the exterior must look exactly as it looked in the beginning. Any questions? No questions? All right. So we're done with this chapter. I'm going to give you guys a quick break as I set up for the next one, okay?